We're pleased to have our brother Stephen DiLorenzo to exhort us this morning. We had the pleasure a few weeks ago, and it's his turn again already. So thank you for being with us, brother Stephen. And this title of his remarks this morning is Under the Sun, S-U-N, to clarify, and you'll understand that when we read Ecclesiastes 1. Ecclesiastes 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south, turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, there is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ever ruled over Jerusalem before me. I've experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly, but I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. So with that, we'll turn our attention to our brother Stephen. His title is Under the Sun.
Morning. So last time I spoke, I made a brief comment in my exhortation about the book of Ecclesiastes and how it can be one of the most depressing books ever read. It is also one of my favorite books, and I'm going to expound a little bit today on the book of Ecclesiastes and particularly on Solomon himself. In Ecclesiastes 1, verse 3, which we just read, it says, "What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun?" This question is asked and answered by King Solomon, and in our language, it means about this. What good does a man get out of his life if he lives only for what this world can give? If any man ever has been able to give the right answer to this great question out of his own wisdom and experience, that man was Solomon. If any man ever came into this world with a golden spoon in his mouth, Solomon certainly did. He was well born. He was the favorite son of one of the greatest and best men who ever lived. For his father, King David, was a man after God's own heart. Solomon was made king of a great kingdom while his father was still alive to counsel and help him. From this, we see that he had every advantage that high station and boundless wealth and opportunity could give him. He had wisdom, riches, wealth, and honor such as no king ever had before him or since. An invincible army stood ready to do his bidding, and all the power of a great nation that was under the special protection and favor of God was behind him. He had only to command, and it was done, to express a wish, and it was gratified. He had received the best education it was possible to give him, and was called the wisest of men. The fame of his wisdom covered the earth, and caused the Queen of Sheba to make a long pilgrimage of weary weeks and months, to sit at his feet in wonder. She looked upon the beauty of his wonderful palace and the magnificent temple he had built. She reviewed his matchless army, considered the numbers of men who served him, and then she looked in amazement upon the wealth of gold and precious things that surrounded him, and took her departure, declaring that the half had not been told her. This is the kind of ability Solomon had with which to answer his own question. He wrote 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs, all full of wisdom. If he wasn't qualified to speak as an expert, where can we find one? Let us see how well qualified he was to know what he was talking about from his own actual experience. Every great pleasure was at his fingertips. If he wanted anything, he had only to reach out his soft, jeweled hand and take it. His kingdom had peace and rest from war during all his reign, so that he had plenty of time to enjoy himself, and from what he says, he lost no time. He lived in a palace surrounded by courtiers who were not spring chickens. He was honored, admired, and flattered as few men have been. No greater honor than his could be known, no greater wisdom found in any books, and no higher station attained. He was so rich that his wealth could not be measured. He had 40,000 horses and 20,000 horsemen. The high cost of living never troubled him, for his provisions for his household and attendants in one day were 281 bushels of fine flour, approximately 17,000 pounds, 566 bushels of meal, approximately 32,000 pounds, 10 fatted oxen out of the stall, 20 out of the pasture, 100 sheep, besides hart, roebuck, fowl deer, and fatted fowl. Solomon had no ambition that he could not have achieved, no curiosity that had not been satisfied. Like his princely father, he was a close observer, and nothing escaped him, so that he was able to say, "I have seen all the works that are done under the sun," meaning that the world had nothing more to show him or to give him, and that was certainly going somewhere. At some time in our lives, we have all envied men of great scholarship and intellectual attainments, and have thought of what a foretaste of the kingdom it would be to have the time and opportunity to learn all the things we would like to know. We have believed that one of the greatest joys this life could give is the joy of knowing things. Well, Solomon not only drank that well dry, but he pulled out the pump, for he exhausted all the schools and colleges of his day. He made all his teachers nervous in their vain endeavor to teach him something more than he already knew. And when he had pumped that fountain dry, he sighed and said, "Go to, now I will see what I can get out of mirth and pleasure." And then he cut loose on that line, and he began to carry on in a way to make a baseball fan at the World Series look like a dummy in a clothing store window. He got into his golden chariot with the diamond-set wheels and went round the track in a way to set the bleachers crazy. At breakneck speeds, he galloped over the rose-lined avenues of sensuous pleasures that opened for him in every direction, looking as if they led straight to paradise. But his long and shining car of delight lost a wheel, and he was down in the mud again, crying out to any who might be following in his wake, "Go back, don't come this way, for here all is vanity and vexation of spirit." Then he took to wine. He hit up the booze. He tried a lot of things. He began to love many strange women, laying hold of folly with both hands. This is where he struck out. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. but soon had to give the same verdict as before, and again cry out, "Vanity, vanity, all is vanity." Then he thinks he has discovered something really substantial, and so he begins building great works and houses, chief of which is the magnificent temple still called by his name. It required 7 years to build and took the combined efforts of 183,000 Jews and strangers to do the work. It took 10,000 men 11 years to cut the trees. There were 80,000 hewers of wood and 70,000 burden bearers. There were 80,000 squared stones, all so perfectly shaped in the quarries that the sound of neither hammer nor mallet was heard in putting them together in the temple. At the completion of the work, there was a feast of 7 days. At its dedication, Solomon sacrificed 120,000 sheep and 20,000 oxen. The temple was built of white marble, so artfully joined that it appeared like one stone. The roof was of olive wood, covered with pure gold. That is where the idea of covering the domes of many of our Capitol buildings with gold leaf originated. When the sunshine fell on the temple, its splendor was so dazzling that the eyes were almost blinded. The temple courts and apartments could house 300,000 people. There were 1,453 columns of fine white marble. Over $3 billion worth of gold was used. $1 billion worth of silver was used on the floors and the walls, which were overlaid with gold and silver. There were 200 targets of beaten gold, with 600 shekels of gold in each target. There were 300 targets with 300 shekels in each target. There were 300 shields of beaten gold, with 3 pounds of gold in each shield. And the value of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was approximately $20 million. When the temple was dedicated, the glory of God filled it. Then Solomon turned his talent and wealth toward making a beautiful Jerusalem by planting vineyards and laying out gardens that were like a fairyland. And then, like a tale of magic, he produced orchards in which he had a great collection of the finest and rarest trees in all the world. Trees from every climate and flowers of every kind were there. And all these were kept green and beautiful by irrigation from artificial lakes. It is doubtful if the world had ever seen greater beauty than Solomon, with his unlimited power, produced in Jerusalem at that time. But even all this pleased his fancy only for a little while, and soon he seems to have nothing but dust in his mouth, and again cries out, "All is vanity." But almost immediately he seems to have taken up another whim and says, "I got me servants and maidens, and also had great possessions of great and small cattle, above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also gold and silver, and the peculiar treasures of kings and of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men, as musical instruments, and that of all sorts," meaning, no doubt, that he became an art collector, and he began to feed on the beautiful and the artistic, somewhat as millionaires are doing now, securing for himself the very best that had to be in painting, old china, bric-a-brac, sculpture, musical instruments, singers, and performers. And then, at voluptuous ease, he would lie on a princely couch that seemed almost to float in the air, and drink to the full all that he could get out of them in the way of enjoyment. But presently, as he is again almost dying with disappointment, and crying out in the same old doleful tone, "All is vanity and vexation of spirit," meaning that there was nothing in it all but an empty puff of air that could only fill a bubble for a moment. Then he goes on to say, "So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem, and whatever my eyes desired I kept not from them. I withhold not my heart from joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor. And then I looked on all the works my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. And so, this wise and honored and wealthy man goes on drinking first from one golden cup and then another, only to dash them all away as soon as tasted in bitter disappointment. And then, after he had tried them all, to say, "Not one can satisfy," confirming what his father David had said in the statement, "The young lions do lack and suffer hunger." And just what every millionaire on earth today knows from his own experience. To find starvation of the most awful kind today, don't go into the slums, but go to the people who are enormously wealthy. Andrew Carnegie says that there are no happy millionaires. And John D. Rockefeller said that he got more out of the first $1,000 he made than out of any 10 millions after. Every man wants to be satisfied. I do, and so do you. Everyone is reaching out for happiness, peace, and rest. We have climbed high and probed deep and still not found what we have sought. No matter how old we are, no matter if our hair is gray, no matter what our bank account may be, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. We were all meant for better things. We were never meant for the slop and the swill barrels of sin. Why do we spend our money for that which is not bread? Go back to Solomon's doleful cry of all is vanity. What does it mean? Was the trouble all with Solomon, or is all creation out of joint? Is there no good to be found in any of the things which he employed his time? Is going to school no better than wasting time in idleness? Does a keen appreciation of the beautiful carry with it a curse and not a blessing? Is there no benefit in architecture, music, or sculpture? Is there nothing but evil in wealth, wisdom, and high station in life? Was Solomon really starving while apparently feeding on the finest of wheat? He said so many things that appear to contradict all he said about vanity and vexation of spirit. So what does it mean? But wait a moment. When Solomon says all is vanity, he also says under the sun. And that shows the standpoint from which he drew his conclusions. What we see as we go through life always depends upon where we stand to look. Many a man who tries to talk as if he were standing on a mountain shows by what he says that he is up to his eyes in mud. From what he says, you know the viewpoint from which he has come to his conclusion. To know a man's viewpoint is to know why he sees the things he claims to see. And now we know why Solomon said, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. It was because he was looking at things from a viewpoint of under the sun. As if a man could tell what a rainbow were like while standing on his head in a dark cellar. In the little book of Ecclesiastes from which the text is taken, the expression under the sun occurs 31 times. It's as if Solomon wanted everyone to understand that what he said therein was said from the standpoint of low ground. The great king was looking at things from a low, central, materialistic plane, and from that viewpoint, every word he said was true. Take away God, take away the Bible, take away inspiration and revelation, take away all hope of a better life in the world to come, destroy all thought of resurrection, and put in its place nothing but hopeless and endless night, and you have nothing left that is worth living for. The life of the greatest and wisest man is then no better than that of a fool. The best fruits of the world would then turn to ashes on the lips, and it would be better to die than to live. Blot out everything except what we can know through our senses, and keep from us all light from a source higher than the sun, and the very best life can give is worse than nothing at all. Destroy in every man the spark that tells him there is a God, and that his Son died to make us free, and every grave would hold a suicide. Let all hope die, and despair would reign. We have only begun to know a little about ourselves when we discover that nothing under the sun can satisfy us. It was this great truth that Solomon began to realize after he found nothing but disappointment in the very best the world could give him. Under the sun, nothing lasts, nothing endures, nothing satisfies. No sooner do we begin to think we have a thing safe forever than it is gone. We love but to lose. Whatever we have is ours but for one brief moment, and the anguish of our loss is a wound that never heals. No happiness is possible without the hope of certainty, and the thing we feel we must have mocks us as it flies by. All the gold in the world has not given treasure enough to satisfy the man who has a greed for gain. The man with a hunger for honor and distinction has never been able to get enough of it. And the same can be said of everything else for which men strive and struggle and destroy each other and themselves. Nothing this world can give is worthwhile unless, while living in it, we can have more than is revealed by the light of the sun. Destroy the Bible and all faith in God, and we might as well eat, drink, and be merry, and die. Nothing will do unless it can give us the wings of the morning and let us mount higher than the sun. For what can a mole know about the sunrise, or a man in a pit know about the beauty of the mountains? No paradise that we can build for ourselves without God can be more than a little waiting room to the grave. Without God, the revelation of Jesus Christ, and the hope of his coming kingdom, all is indeed vanity and vexation of spirit. But at last Solomon spreads the wings of faith and gets higher than the sun. And when he does, the change in his viewpoint changes the meaning of life, for now he can see with a clear eye. Solomon has now reached the place where his faith can lay hold on the righteousness and wisdom of God. Note how his vision has expanded and his sight cleared up. Surely I know, no uncertainty about that it shall be well with them that fear God. There is no more talk about everything being vanity now, and the reason is because at last he has a viewpoint higher than the sun. As is always the case with even the humblest man who has faith in God, Solomon can now see that nothing good is ever lost, and that bread cast on waters is sure to return after many days. Now he sees that God's wisdom triumphs over man's vanity and foolishness. Then, to sum up, he closes the book saying, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, and every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil, and there is no vanity about anything God does." Let us now take a look at some men who looked at life from a viewpoint higher than the sun. It is what kept Noah working away on the ark for 120 years without seeing a flash of lightning or hearing a clap of thunder. Had he only been living for what he could see, it would never have been said of him that he was a just man and perfect and walked with God. Abraham was another man who had faith that lifted him higher than the sun. When looking for a city which had foundations, whose maker and builder was God, you never hear a word from that grand old man about being vanity and vexation of spirit. And then there was Moses. He had a vision that pierced the clouds and went far beyond the sun, when he saw that the reproach of Christ would bring him greater and more lasting riches than the treasures of Egypt, and that he might have had by simply folding his arms and doing nothing. But he endured as seeing him who is invisible, and that made it easy for him to refuse to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Neither was he looking from the low plane of under the sun, when in bidding farewell to the army he had brought out of Egypt, he said, "The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms." There is not a word about under the sun in the chapter where Joshua says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And no such words as vanity and vexation of spirit ever fell from the lips of that great captain of iron courage. Samuel was looking at things from much higher than the sun when he said, "To obey is better than sacrifice." And so was Job when he said, "I will trust him though he slay me, and I know that my Redeemer lives." Ezra was not standing on low ground when he prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord and to do it, or when he said, "The hand of our God is upon them for good that seek him, and his power and his wrath is against all them that forsake him." The same was true of Nehemiah when, in building up the wall that was broken down, he said, "I am doing a great work." From under the sun, it would have looked very small. David was looking from higher than the sun, or he could never have said, "The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him." And Daniel had a vision that swept far higher than the sun when he went into the lion's den with no more anxiety than you and I would go to dinner. Stephen's viewpoint was from much higher than the sun when he cried out, "Behold, I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing on the right hand of God." And so it was also with John, when near the close of his long and busy life he took up the much-worn pen with which he had written so much that will still be bright when the stars are dim, and wrote the precious words that have been shining down the centuries ever since. "Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew not him. Beloved, now we are the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but we shall know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is." And later still, when a white-haired prisoner on the Isle of Patmos, John again had a vision of things infinitely higher than the sun, and once more took up the stylus and wrote, "And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. And he was clothed in a vesture dripped in blood, and his name was called the Word of God. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords." Jude also was looking from very much higher than the sun when he declared with unhesitating confidence that he is able to keep you from falling and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. And oh, how much higher than the sun was Jesus looking from when, after the shame of the cross and the grave, he stood on resurrected ground. How infinitely far above the sun was his eye fixed when he said to the 11 faithful ones, "All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. Go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world." And thank God that the time will surely come when in our vision we shall not be confined to the low plane described as under the sun, but when with him in whom we have believed we shall be lifted far above all principality and power and might and dominion, and reign with him as kings and priests in the kingdom of God, where eye hath not seen nor ear heard the things that he has prepared for them that love him. Where we shall no more see through a glass darkly, but face to face, and where we shall know as we are known, where God shall wipe away all tears from our eyes, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away, where death will be swallowed up in victory, where the wolf shall lie down with the lamb, and our children and our children's children shall dance in the streets of that great city, New Jerusalem. Oh, to hear the words of the King. Because you have been faithful over a few things, I will make you a ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord. Fear not, little children, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Thank you.